Hello everyone and welcome to IFST's Sensory Science Group webinar, Text Analytics Taster. My name is Stephanie Mitchell and I'm the chair of the IFST Sensory Science Special Interest Group. The group allows members interested in sensory science to engage and share knowledge with fellow professionals. We cover a wide range of topics relating to the sensory properties of food and drink, including sensory testing and analysis, consumer trends, neuroscience, the impact of social networking, and health and wellness. We are also involved in accreditation and examination of sensory training and the review and promotion of ethical and professional standards. This webinar is 6th in a series, replacing our planned June conference, which was cancelled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. If you'd like to catch up on our past webinars, visit the IFST website or look at www.ifst.org/webinars. Please keep an eye on the IFST's events page for details of the next webinar. Feel free to make comments and ask questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A function, which should be at the bottom of your screen. There will be a Q&A session after the presentation where we will respond to as many of these questions as possible, and Sarah Bilson, a member of the Sensory Science Group Committee, will ask these questions. So our speaker today is Maurice Gozenbach, and he is founder of Caplena. So striving to make the most recent achievements in the machine learning area accessible to the market research industry, Maurice co-founded Caplena in 2017. He brings together an IT background focused on machine learning techniques for language and image problems, on which he has published multiple papers based on his hands-on entrepreneurial and consulting experience. So without further ado, I will hand over to you, Maurice. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, for that introduction. I'm super happy to be here today and present you this Text Analytics Taster webinar in the next 30 minutes. Before diving into the actual content, I want to give you a quick introductory example. Now, this is nothing to do with market research or the food industry specifically. It's just to show you, where the current cutting edge of research is on text analytics. Now, some of you might have heard of this model called GPT-3. It has been released a couple of months ago, and it has really, pushed the boundaries of what is thought to be possible with text analytics. So you can think of this model like a console. You enter some text in natural language form, in free text form, and it will answer you in text form again. Now, what this model can do, for example, is it can answer trivia. So you can ask it, who was president of the United States in 1955? And the model will answer, Dwight D. Eisenhower was the president of the United States in 1955. You can also ask it questions such as how many legs an animal has, and you can also ask it why animals don't have 3 legs, and it will reason that animals don't have 3 legs because they would fall over. So pretty impressive already. Second example here on the right hand side, I'm just going to read this text quickly. Or what if the AI decides to focus on one specific area, like solving climate change, for example? As long as this AI's incentives are in line with human incentives, it might be able to come up with solutions far beyond what humanity is currently capable to conceive of. And as a result, humanity could become a lot less fragmented and divided simply because an AI could not take the values of all humanity and apply them in a global context. Now, as you might have guessed already, this text was written by GPT-3 as well. So this is to showcase that, a lot of things have happened in the last 10 years in text analytics, and it's really a good time to reevaluate things and try out new methods. With that, I would like to get started with the actual webinar. This is the agenda. We have 3 parts that we're going to cover. First of all, I'm going to give you a quick survey of 4 different methods and tools that are currently out there. Then I'm going to go more in depth in one specific use case, which is customer feedback analysis. This is our use case, so I hope to be, somewhat of an expert there. And finally, I'm happy, of course, to answer all your questions. So let's get started with the first part, the survey of methods and tools. Now, the first method I'm going to show you, most of you have probably already heard of this. Sentiment analysis has been around for quite some time now and is, become more or less a commodity. The goal is to assign each text into different buckets, either positive, negative, neutral, or, on a continuous scale between -1 and 1, for example. This is really part of almost every text analytics tool that you're going to find out there. But there is some difference between the different methods. So you can have either a global or an entity level sentiment analysis. Global level means the sentiment is assigned to the entire text, to the entire verbatim, for example. Entity level means that you really attach it to a specific part of the verbatim, which is of course more challenging, but also gives more, provides more insights, more meaning. An example might be that a person might say, overall, I'm quite happy with this supermarket, but the parking space is really limited. So on an overall scale, this would be positive, but on an entity level towards the parking, there is a negative sentiment. Now, this works pretty well for most methods out of the box, but in certain cases there might be some fine-tuning needed, especially if things are if there are adjectives that modify the meaning of a subject in a very specific way. Let's say you have the bread is dry. In this context, dry is negative because in context with bread, dry is negative attributes. But if you have raincoats, for example, and say the raincoat is dry, then that is obviously a positive thing. So here you might need a little fine-tuning depending on your domain. Below, I've copied in a couple of links to solutions out there. This will be the case for all the 4 methods I'm presenting. Most of the links there, they always point to demos, mostly to demos of APIs, because getting access to the real applications is usually a bit more challenging. You can't try it out that easily, and I wanted to give you an easy way to try it out if you're interested. So where is this applied in market research? Pretty simple, anywhere. You can apply this to open-ended responses, social media data, voice transcripts, reviews, whatever. It's pretty flexible method, and as I mentioned, it's pretty solid already. It works in most cases. Let's get to the second method. This is categorization. So here we want to assign one or more categories to each element of text. There are algorithms and APIs out there that will do this pretty well already for predefined categories. So for example, you can categorize your news, you can categorize maybe also your customer feedback in a way. But for other applications, you might need some more customization, because more often than not, these categories that are predefined only cover a part of what you actually want. So you will most probably need to do some fine-tuning, some customization on these pre-provided methods. Now, where can we use this? The classical example here are open-ended responses. Here it is called coding texts, but of course you can also do this on social media data or whatever. I have copied in again 2 links down there, and also linked a few commercial applications such as ours, but also MaxQDA, or the classical tools for coding text like Scribe or Qualtrics TextIQ. A third method is entity extraction. The goal here is to identify entities, as the word says, so identifying people, organizations, dates, events, or such things from a text. One application could be that we want to count how often an organization occurs, how often a name occurs, what kind of dates are mentioned, so like knowledge extraction in a way. And another application, which is maybe even more relevant, would be anonymization. If you want to pass your texts to someone else or to another application, but you don't want to share some personal identifiable information, for example, you can use this technique to remove names or addresses or phone numbers from the texts. So this is probably the prime application, but of course, as I said, you can also use it for larger volume data where you want to gather some knowledge from, such as social media data or blog posts. And the final method I'm going to present here is keyword extraction. Now, here we try to, extract the relevant keywords, the most important keywords that characterize a text from a larger body of text. This is often done by comparing the occurrence frequency in your text with a reference corpus, for example, the news, and then give you back those keywords that are overrepresented in your texts. Now, this is a really practical method if you want to get a very quick overview of what is happening, because this doesn't need any training. It works out of the box. It's really a one-click solution. So that's the big advantage there. The disadvantage maybe is that things usually aren't aggregated in a very meaningful way. So here on the left-hand side, you can see an example. And, maybe feedback and response should actually be, in the same category if it was a meaningful categorization. And maybe you would also want some more context. So we'd have, positive feedback would be then maybe a category. But the advantage here again is that you get something out of the box immediately. Works well if you want to have sort of this quick and dirty analysis, or if you have really long texts with a lot of content, news or blog articles. Now I want to have a quick look at different tools by their kind of interface. Now I'm just going to show you all three at once here. We have libraries, APIs, and user-facing applications. The more you go towards the right, the easier these applications are to use, the less the implementation effort is. But of course, they're also, the more you are on the right, the more focused towards one specific application they are. So let's start maybe with the rightmost bucket, the user-facing application. Now, these are your classical applications, classical software applications where you have a graphical user interface, but they are tailored to a very specific purpose. They're obviously easy to use, but if you want to customize things, that's often very difficult or not possible at all. In the middle, we have APIs. APIs are application programming interfaces, and this means that you can send your data programmatically to a third party that will do some analysis on it and then send you back the results. This requires a little programming knowledge, but really only very little. But you can then do with the results whatever you like. So the kind of analysis is provided by the third-party provider, but what you do with it, the output, the result can be customized in any way. A couple of examples there would be Google Natural Language Processing or IBM Watson, but also a couple of the user-facing applications offer an API by now. So we do, but also Qualtrics does, for example. It's getting more and more common that user-facing applications also provide this API interface. And finally, we have libraries. So libraries are really low-level packages, low-level frameworks that you can use when programming such solutions. They really require a knowledgeable programmer and significant effort to get a good solution. But obviously, they're the most flexible. You can achieve almost any kind of application through these. But it has to be said, this probably only makes sense if you want to solve, a core business problem of yours. If the problem you want to solve is not at the core of your company, at the core challenge for your company, then you're probably better off with one of the two options on the right. A couple of words on automation of text analytics in general. In our experience, there is really a thin line between the degree of automation and the quality that you achieve. So there is, 100% automation, you can do that, but very often the quality will deteriorate rapidly if you go towards these 100%. In our experience, there is really a sweet spot, let's say maybe at 80% of automation and 20% manual work. Like this, you will get quality results which are, comparable or almost on par with a fully manual analysis, but still save 80% of the work. That's where we see the sweet spot. So, a healthy mix of semi-automated analysis, and always do a qualitative check by hand as well. Whatever method you apply, always have a look at a glimpse on the data as well to get a feeling for what people really said. With this, I would like to get to the second part of our webinar, the case study on customer feedback analysis. And for this part, I'm super happy to welcome Judith here. Judith works in product development and process innovation at Planted. And for those of you that shamefully don't know Planted, they're an up-and-coming food startup from Switzerland producing plant-based meat alternatives. Now, they're pretty popular in Switzerland already, being featured in the shelves of the largest retailer here and in many restaurants as well. So, Judith, a warm welcome from my side, and it would be great if you could give a quick intro on yourself and Planted a little bit in more detail.
Thank you very much, Maurice, for the kind introduction and also for choosing Planted as a use case to show your product. As already mentioned, we're a food tech startup developing and producing plant-based meats with a focus on highly fibrous products such as chicken pieces and pulled pork. And since founding the company around 1.5 years ago, we built up our own factory, grew to a team of around 60 people, and after being already quite present in the Swiss market, we just entered the German market. We're standing for increasing the sustainability of the world food system and decreasing animal suffering by convincing the consumer to choose our products, our plant-based meats over animal meats. And for this, it's very important that we're focusing on producing the best, most delicious and clean and natural products, which is very much driven by our science.
Thanks a lot for that intro. With that, I would like to introduce our use case, which is analyzing open-ended responses from surveys or customer feedback. And the basic issue we have is that we have too many open ends, but too little time to analyze them. Now, open-ended text is pretty nice for most stakeholders involved in doing, feedback analysis. It's nice for the survey designer because, it's easy to implement an open-ended question. It's nice for the client or the researcher because it introduces less bias than multiple choice. And it's also nice for the respondent because me as a respondent, I prefer having one open end instead of 5 pages of 1 to 10 questions, of which half don't even concern me at all. So there's only one person which doesn't like open ends, and that's the poor girl or guy that has to analyze them in the end. Now, Planted collects feedback as well. They get about 1,000 customer feedbacks per quarter, which is not insanely much, but a pretty decent number for that they only started collecting feedback a couple of months ago. They also use open ends, and my question to Judith here will be, what kind of feedback do you collect, and what question do you actually want to answer with those feedbacks?
At the moment, we're mostly collecting feedback from our webshop consumers or customers who receive a survey after purchasing or after consuming our product. And on top, we're also conducting targeted consumer studies, but we're always looking into other new ways to get more consumer insights. The feedback we're collecting at the moment is mostly focusing on understanding why consumers choose our products and what they would like to be improved and what they love about our product. And we believe that the combination of open-end questions and multiple choice questions is most beneficial and also most actionable and also most differentiated.
Makes a lot of sense. So now we have this feedback, we just need to analyze it. How does this work? And you might have guessed that we have a solution for this. Now, Caplena is a software as a service platform helping you reveal the insights buried in your open ends. There are 3 steps involved in getting your insights. The first one is that we help you discover topics in your data. So we show you which topics might be relevant, but then again, you as a researcher or you as a project manager, you can go in and refine these topics, rearrange them and adapt them to your needs. In a second step, we auto tag all your verbatims, be it 100 responses or 100,000. But again, you can go in and fine-tune these records by reviewing a part of them to nudge the AI into the right direction. And finally, we provide some tools to tell your story, because we think, this is the actual part where you should spend most of your time creating beautiful insights, beautiful dashboards, and not sifting manually through the data. So I hope by explaining these 3 steps, I have given you an idea why we call ourselves Augmented Intelligence Platform. This is really at the core of our service. We think that the efficient collaboration between the AI doing, the repetitive heavy lifting and the human getting, bringing in insights and making sense of the whole thing, that's really where the essence of automation is. Now, my questions here for Judith will be, from the beginning, you have aimed for a high degree of automation. Why is that? Is this something that you personally drove to automate this process, or is it something which is part of the DNA, so to say, of your company, of Planted?
We believe that automation is key early on in the growth phase, as we are right now, to be ready for times when manual data analysis becomes too time intensive and starts hindering further growth. And although we have been collecting a ton of consumer feedback over the last couple of months, when we start entering new markets, this will grow tremendously. Additionally, which might be even more important, automation can potentially make data analysis more objective and might also avoid to oversee details if it's well set up. Automation data-drivenness is very much part of our company DNA, starting from our science department to our production and to all consumer-facing decisions. And we believe that it's a very important basis for success and for company growth.
Thanks for that. But maybe a critical question here. Aren't you, in danger of doing some premature optimization because you optimize something which could, as it currently is, could still be solved by hand, right? You could have a few students going through these few thousand feedbacks manually, and the actual problem might only occur in a couple of months when you have a larger volume. So isn't that premature optimization?
No, not at all. I think it's actually quite the contrary. I think it's pretty important to adopt such methods very early on, as it also requires some optimization in the whole data collection process in order to best possibly analyze this data and get the most out of it. And you wouldn't want to have these learnings later when you actually risk to lose quite a lot of data or information. So we see this transition phase as a phase to learn about data analysis, learn about data collection, and be ready for times when we actually need it, which will be rather soon, in a few months or weeks.
That absolutely makes sense. With that, I would like to show you what the output then really looks like. What do you get after analyzing your open-ends this way? And we really try to deliver more than keywords here. And I'm going to give you a brief example of what we mean by this. We have 3 verbatims here, one saying good service, one saying great customer service, and one saying bad network service. They all contain the word service, but they're actually put into 3 different buckets. One is the overall positive category, one is about customer service, one is about network service. And this is really, the most important thing that differentiates us from other solutions, that we try to put it into meaningful categories and not keywords. And here you can see an example of this. On the left-hand side is a screenshot of a keyword analysis solution. Now, this is fully automatic. This doesn't require any effort at all, but you can also see that the kind of insights that you're getting are sort of limited. Having service as a keyword doesn't give you too much information. And on the right-hand side, we have the output of our application, which does require a little manual work, maybe the 20% I mentioned before, but for that you get real high quality results, and you get the service in that bucket where it should actually be. So how do we do that? Well, we use a neural network, surprise, surprise, to do this categorization. But just as important as the architecture, is also the training process. And here we have a pretty unique, I'd say, learning process. So first, we train our AI on publicly available data, things like Wikipedias or news corpuses. Here, the system learns basic language understanding, things like negations, synonyms, antonyms, etc. Then we train it on all the 6.5 million reviewed responses that we have on our platform. And this is like a really unique asset from where the AI gets a lot of knowledge, and you have a lot, when you use it now, you have a lot of out of the box knowledge already. It knows what expensive means, it knows what good customer service means. But finally, you can train it on your specific data. And if the 6.5 million or the 80% your specific data is then the 20% where you teach it what you want to have it done differently than other customers maybe. So much for the theory. But now, what is the actual output that we're getting of the application? And for this, I would like to give the word back to Judith. What are examples of things that you found out with these methods, and how do you process the results? How do you give the results back to the team and incorporate them in your business?
So our product development basically works comparably to a software company, such that we update our products on a regular basis, such as starting with Chicken 1.0, which we updated to Chicken 2.0. And this update is a combination of better understanding consumer needs, or basically a consumer pull, and a technology push. And the data we analyze with Caplena, we basically use to decide on the most important product features, which we would like to improve for the next release, based on whose needs we're trying to address.
Super interesting. Thanks a lot for that. And with that, we're already getting towards the end of our session. But before closing it, a few final words. And here I would like to ask Judith first. Where do you see Planted going in the next couple of years? And where do you see the industry overall going? What is going to happen in the next couple of years here?
Well, only speaking for the plant protein space and not for the whole food industry, I'm expecting a tremendous number of new brands and new innovations, be it products and technologies, to support this shift towards animal-free or more animal-friendly diets, which is of high importance to reduce the social and environmental footprint of the whole world food system. And this shift will go hand in hand with a shift in consumer behavior, a shift in needs and expectations towards these kinds of products, which the whole industry will have to better understand in order to design the products according to consumers' needs.
Thanks for that. Now I'd like to do the same thing and offer you an idea of where I think AI is headed in the future. Now, I'm sure you've seen quotes like this one: by 2029, computers will have human-level intelligence. This was said by Ray Kurzweil, who is Google's director of engineering. Now, I don't want to, step into the trenches with Mr. Kurzweil. I don't think that would end well for me, but I do want to offer another view on this whole thing. And for that, I'd like to show you a couple of examples from this introductory model I showed you, GPT-3, where the model doesn't work as perfectly as it did there. So you can ask it how many eyes an animal has, and it knows that. But when you ask it how many eyes a foot has, or my foot has, it will insist that your foot has 2 eyes. It will also tell you that the sun has 1 eye, and it will get very abstruse when you ask it how many bonks are in a quoit, or how many rainbows it takes to jump from Hawaii to 17. It will give you a very precise answer there. Now, I'm showing you this not to discredit this model in any way. It's super impressive model. I just want to make the point that these are still pattern recognition machines, and they're very advanced and very sophisticated pattern recognition machines, but they're not human level intelligent machines. And I think, those human level intelligence AIs, they're still, far off. It's not a linear progress that we have to make to get there. It's still a, one step further which we can't anticipate yet. So with this, I would like to close. I think AI should be treated as a technology, as an aid, like maybe Excel has changed the way we work 20 years ago. Now AI will do the same. And with that, I'm at the end. Thank you very much for listening, and I will now hand back to Sarah Bilson, who will guide us through the Q&A.
Hi, thank you, Maurice and Judith, for such an interesting presentation. We're now moving on to today's Q&A session. Just a reminder that you can submit questions using the Q&A function, which should be at the bottom of your screen. So moving on to our first question. Maurice, how do you deal with multiple languages?
Well, we actually handle quite a few languages out of the box. So the model is pre-trained on the Wikipedias of over 100 languages. There it gets, a good basic language understanding of these languages. But of course, it is to say that the quality differs depending on the amount of data that we have already seen for that language. And there we definitely are stronger with Western European languages, German, of course, English, French, Spanish, Italian, things like that, and rather less so in languages like Eastern Asian languages maybe. It doesn't mean, it doesn't work at all. It just needs a little more fine tuning probably with these, or far away languages.
Great, thanks for that. So moving on to our next question. It's still, we've got a question from one of our delegates here. It still sounds like quite a lot of work to handle. Is it not possible to get text analytics as a full service?
Well, first of all, I want to give another opinion here. So it is a little bit of work, but it's really not excessive. So if you know the tool, you can do a good analysis within an hour easily. And if you do this on a repeated basis, if you have a kind of a monitoring study or do this maybe once a year or so, then the effort is even lower. But to your actual question, yes, we do offer a full service as well. So it's us using our own software and then providing the finished results to you. But for us, this is also, the goal is always to make this also easier to onboard you onto the software so that after some time you can then start using it yourself. That's always the long-term goal, because we think it really should be an end user application.
Cool, great. Thanks for that. How does the model cope with misspellings or bad grammar? Does it count them as two separate things?
Right, so maybe on a side note, we have like a special mode that goes, that is optimized for like brand awareness questions, what we call semi-open questions. If you have more keyword answers or brand names as answers, there we have a slightly different model which focuses a lot on misspellings and is very robust there. The usual model we have, it does also cope with some misspellings, but it's not quite as robust. How it works there is that we don't actually look at entire words, but we look at subword parts comparable to syllables, and therefore there is some resilience towards misspellings, but it won't get every single one. That's something that needs to be learned as well. I think back grammar, that is pretty well handled, because the training data that we use is pretty dirty in general. People don't really write perfect grammar usually in surveys or in online reviews.
Okay, brilliant. We've got another great question here. Do you see automated analysis of large amounts of open comments to be ever able to replace quantitative scale type surveys?
So in the sense that you don't need any closed questions anymore, any
I think that's what
multiple choice questions.
Yeah.
I don't think it's about entirely replacing them. I think my vision would be to very much simplify the current type of survey, so that instead of having 5 pages with multiple choice and a few scale questions, I would rather have maybe 2 or 3 questions at max, maybe 1 open end or 2 open ends and 1 or 2 scale questions, to make it, to make it much simpler for the participant to give their opinion and to catch the broadness that you would need many questions for with multiple choice in the open end. So I don't see it as replacing it, but it's a method to really make surveys much simpler and much more concise.
Okay, brilliant. When is it worth using AI or automation versus manual analysis? Is there a minimum word count to consider, or a minimum number of respondents that maybe you might ask to participate in your survey?
Right, so there is no technical lower limit. You can use these applications with 20 responses if you want to, but of course the gain will not be huge. I mean, with 20 responses, you'll probably be, 10% faster than if you just read them all by hand. It will be a nicer interface to use. You'll be a bit more structured maybe, but that's definitely not where the big gains are. And if you only have 20 questions, I mean, that's something, if you only have 20 responses, then honestly, I would also recommend just reading them all, because having a small qualitative sample as well and have a qualitative idea on what the people are saying always makes sense. So I'd say, the big gains really come if you have 200 plus responses per question. That would be, I think there it really starts to make a lot of sense.
And how much, so just to build on that further, and I don't know if you've got any examples from Planted, but based on the answer you just gave, how much time do you think it does save, say on a 200 responses, like using the automated platform and the 20% qualitative view from the human, versus doing it all manually? What kind of time frame do you think is saved or efficiency gained?
Right. I mean, of course, it depends heavily on the kind of data you have, on the topic, how well it is already known by our AI, how standardized it is, how complex the responses are. So if it's, for example, B2C always tends to be a lot easier than B2B responses, because in B2B context, everyone wants to sound smart, so they give very convoluted answers. But maybe a rule of thumb with 200 responses, I'd say you save maybe half of the time, and of course that the percentage of time you save increases the larger your data set is. So if you have 2,000 responses, then it will probably be at the 80% or something like that.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful, I'm sure, for a lot of people. So I guess this is always like the big question when it comes to AI. So you gave the great quote about in computers or AI having human level intelligence, but can the software assess consumers' emotional connection to anything or a brand in particular? Is the emotion there as well?
Right. So in general, I mean, it's a generic AI model, so you're able to train it with all kinds of emotions that you would like, but it's not something that we have, as standard categories that we have predefined. So we don't have out of the box knowledge on, saying this is anger, or this is love, or this is passion or something. Towards your brand. So I think it could learn it pretty fast, but it's not our main focus, and there is a reason for this. We have made tests to see how well the AI is able to distinguish these things, and we have seen that it's still kind of difficult to get consistent high quality results. And I think the main reason for that is that it's even, there's a lot of interpretation going on with these kind of things. And also as a human, you would have, I'm pretty sure you would have significantly different results if you have two different people categorize a number of verbatims into these emotional categories, because you have to do this, reading between the lines, and everybody does that differently depending on their context and their background knowledge. So in short, you can do it, but it's not something we would strongly advise to do. But on a side note here, we're always also happy to conduct experiments. So if you think you have a good scheme, a good categorization scheme that you would like to apply, we're happy to try it out with you together.
I think that also leads really nicely into my next question is, why should we contribute to your contribute our data to your AI's learning?
Right. I think it's it's not only contributing, it's also taking. So it's a give and take. Everyone profits from having more diverse kind of data in the platform, because in next month the effort for them to do their own work will be less than before. So I think it's it's not that you give something up, but it's sharing pots where in the solution as an entirety will get smarter. Also to note here, the learnings that the AI gathers, they're very abstract. It's not like we save information on your specific wording in the survey or the kind of categorization that you defined. That is really not what we will save and what the AI will be giving to other people. So there is no knowledge sharing in that sense. It's really more learning what kind of formulations might be expressing, happiness about customer service, for example.
Great. And then, sorry, clear my throat. So you said, so you founded your company in 2017. Apart from advances in the, the technology capabilities, what are the, have you seen any big changes or big shifts in the type of data that people are or companies are analyzing, or has anything changed significantly since you started?
Well, I think people are, more aware that there are various sources of data, and they are more and more combining different things, like scraped content from Trustpilot, Google Maps reviews, YouTube comments, but also classical surveys. And I think it's about, combining these data that you can really derive a lot of value. So I think that has changed, and also the maybe the attitude towards these applications to just quickly try it out, see if it's the right thing for me, and then if not, then trying out something else, or doing it the classical way. I think there is a bit more eagerness to experiment here than there was before, maybe coming from the US, because in the US I think that was always easier, just trying it out and throwing it away again, whereas in Germany you have a 5-year evaluation project where you need to make sure it's the solution you're going to use for the next 100 years before giving it a try. I think there's a little more dynamicism coming up there.
Great. And do you see a difference in the way that startup companies use this compared to more, the bigger, more established companies? Is there a difference in the way they use it? Are, startups are generally more approachable and willing to try new things, but do you see a big difference between the two?
I'd say, maybe a big difference is the kind of software, the kind of other software they're using. And the other software they're using is in tendency, more modern, more interconnected. And that makes it easier to integrate these kind of applications with other systems. Whereas if you have, your own system for data collection, which is from the 70s, then the effort for making this integration happen is a bit more is a bit larger than with modern applications, where you have pretty well defined standards of how these applications can talk to each other and share the data. I think that's maybe the big difference. On how they use it, well, maybe a bit of, you know, acceptance, a bit of fault tolerance. So accepting that there are still mistakes, but that it's, you know, good enough for the purpose in many ways. So if you have 4.5% or 5%, that doesn't really change the message, right? It's about the what you do with the data and not having five numbers after the comma, and also, you know, the knowledge that that humans do mistakes just as machines do them. You know, having, you know, accepting that statement, that is maybe a bit more common.
Cool, great, thanks. Another great question here. Are there any specific segments of the population that might not be accounted for as we move more to a focus on text analysis? And if so, how do we deal with that?
Not 100% sure I understand this. So segments that would not be accounted for, you know, by the kind of data that we analyze, or by
I guess maybe that aren't don't have access to digital platforms necessarily. Yeah.
Right. I mean, as mentioned from the analysis part, it's really about combining these different data sources. I wouldn't say you should replace classical surveys, not at all. I think for many purposes, they're absolutely the right product. They can just be enriched by other data sources, like, example, online reviews. On the text analysis part, I don't think that is, you know, biased in any way towards one segment or another. I think that is really about how you apply these tools as a user, and your beliefs and biases are have a much higher influence than the kind of technology you are applying.
Cool, thank you. Okay, a bit of a futuristic one here, but will AI overtake humanity in 2045? The year 2045 was the median prediction based on a survey of machine learning experts.
Right.
I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah. Well, I've heard quite a few predictions. I mean, there's this classical quote: "The predictions about are extremely difficult, especially if they're about the future." So, you know, I'm not sure if I really want to put a number here. My personal take is that the current state of AI is making rapid progress, but we aren't gonna reach human level intelligence through this continued linear progress. There is really, you know, a step missing here, from the current solutions to a cognitive understanding as we humans have it. So I think this, and you know, this step might come next year, or it might come only in 500 years, or it might not come, right? So I think it's really hard to anticipate a certain number, but I would say, you know, if the progress continues just linearly, then I'd say no, we're not going to be there at 2045.
Okay. Do you have your own prediction of when we might be there?
To be honest, I would be a bit surprised if I'd still live to see it. But yeah, I'm also, you know, it's something I have to honestly say I don't know, because there is just no way of making a prediction based on data, you know, on this kind of topic.
Cool. Great. We just had a little bit more clarification for the previous question on will segments of the population be left behind, particularly about literacy levels. But I think that you covered that, saying that you don't think this is the solution for everything and that it needs to be taken in combination with other surveys and other methodologies. Okay, let's see if we've got any more questions. Oh. For food products in particular, it is argued that consumers do not know why something tastes good or why they like it. So there is much noise and little signal. How do you attempt to tackle this?
Well, that will be a good question for Judith, because I'm not from the food industry myself. I would love to hear her answer here. But I think, well, in open ends, it's kind of easier to express your determination than with like these 1 to 10 scale questions. So it's probably easier to express if you're very convinced of your opinion or not, and a system can pick up on that. On, you know, not knowing why something tastes good. Well, I as a consumer, I do have pretty specific ideas when I taste something. You know, especially on things that maybe not the taste, but things like consistency, the look, and how it is, the texture is applied. I think those are things where we are, you know, able to judge and give a specific opinion on the result.
I guess a lot of it comes down to the wording of the question, and I think also what you said previously about only having a couple of open-ended, so that consumers don't get bored and will hopefully give more information in a few questions rather than having lots of questions.
Right, okay. Absolutely.
And then following on from that one, have you done any projects looking more specifically at sensory attribute focused text?
I mean, we have done, so maybe on the one remark here. I mean, the platform is used by many companies, and of course I don't look at all the projects in detail, so there are many things I don't know of. I mean, it's actually the usual thing, right? I don't look at the data of our customers except if there is a need for customer support or anything. But I do know that companies used it that are from this area. For example, Givaudan, they did a couple of surveys and analyzed them through our platforms. So I think there is a lot of, you know, sensory attributes, or a lot of sensory attributes are present there. But I can't give you an exact number or an exact wording of the project here.
Okay, it doesn't look like we've got any more questions, so I think we'll close there. So thank you so much, Maurice, and thank you to everyone from across the globe for attending the webinar today. If you do have any further questions, please contact Maurice directly, and his details should be coming up on the screen now. And finally, we would like to remind those of you not familiar with the IFST that you can find useful resources on our website, including our COVID-19 Knowledge Hub and online Food Science and Technology magazine. We welcome new members, so please check our membership benefits page on the IFST website. So thank you so much again, Maurice, and to everyone for attending. Have a good day. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.